Welcome to the Plan Commission meeting for December 19th, 2017. For those that have not had the pleasure of attending a meeting before, a couple of quick notes. First of all, if you would silence your cell phones, we really appreciate that, so we're not distracted during the meeting, other than, we normally are distracted by some things. Also, the way things work is city staff presents on an item, and once they're done presenting, it's opened up just to the Plan Commission for technical questions. Once the technical questions are done, then we open it up for public commentary. If you have something to say, we ask that you please step up to the microphone over there and state your name and address for the meeting minutes. And then please try to keep your comments as germane to the topic as possible. Once all public commentary is done, we close public commentary, bring it back to the commission for discussion and then a vote, and then we just move on to the next item. With that, let's call the roll.
David Borsuk, Ed Bowen, Jeffrey Tomes.
Here.
Thomas Foytak.
Here.
John Hintz.
Here.
Steve Cummings.
Here.
Kathleen Propp.
Here.
John Kiefer.
Here.
Robert Weigert.
Here.
Michael Ford.
Here.
All right, moving on to the approval of the minutes from December 5th. Do we have any additions, corrections, or deletions to those
Make
minutes?
motion to approve.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? We'll conclude it passes. Let us move on to item number 1. 3-lot land division / certified survey map at 2840 Harrison Street, 2837 and 2825 Bowen Street.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
You're welcome, sir.
The petitioner is requesting a 3-lot land division from 2 existing parcels containing a total of about 1.5 acres. The parcels are located on the west side of Bowen Street, north of Nicolay Avenue. The northernmost parcel also has frontage on Harrison Street. The property currently has a total of 3 commercial structures and associated parking areas, and it was the former site for St. Vincent de Paul. The petitioner is requesting the land division to separate the 3 existing buildings onto individual lots. Proposed lot 1 is located on the west side of the parent parcel, and it contains a commercial storage building and parking area. Proposed lot 2 is located on the east side of the parent parcel, and it has a retail building and parking area. A cross-access easement is required between proposed lots 1 and 2, as the lots will have adjoining parking areas. Proposed lot 3 is located south of lot 2 and will not be changing in size or configuration, and there are no immediate plans for new construction or changes to the existing buildings or parking areas on the lots. The land division will not alter the existing land use patterns in the area, and it is consistent with the city's 10 and 20-year comprehensive plan land use recommendations. All 3 lots meet the minimum requirements for width, depth, and area for the urban industrial district, and staff has no concerns with the proposed lot layouts. Public Works has reviewed the proposed land division and noted that the CSM should show all utility laterals and services to all buildings, and they also requested right-of-way dedication of 7 feet on Bowen Street and Harrison Street. And here's the CSM. And staff recommends approval of the 3-lot land division as proposed with the following conditions. A cross-access easement for lots 1 and 2 be recorded with the Winnebago County Register of Deeds. The final CSM include utility laterals, services to all buildings, and the final CSM includes 7 feet of right-of-way dedication on Bowen Street and Harrison Street.
All right, thank you very much. Technical questions, Jeff?
Go back a screen. I assume that the building on lot 3, I mean, the line is drawn in between the 2 buildings, right?
Yes, they should all be on separate
Is
lots.
there sufficient room between those 2 buildings or setback from the lot line that we don't have to do something to grandfather that?
That lot line is not actually changing, basically creating a new lot line between lots 1 and 2, but the lot line between 2 and 3 is not changing.
Okay.
Already done.
All right. No.
All right, other technical questions? Seeing none, anyone here from the public to speak to this item today? Going once? Twice? All right, back to the commission.
Motion to approve.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, call the roll.
Kiefer.
Aye.
Weigert.
Aye.
Ford.
Aye.
Bowen.
Aye.
Tomes.
Aye.
Hintz.
Aye.
Cummings.
Aye.
Propp.
Aye.
Foytak.
Aye.
Motion carried 9-0.
Okay, moving on to item number 2, a 3-lot land division and certified survey map and subdivision variance request for property located at 2175 Conhoqua Street or Lakeshore Municipal Golf Course.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
You're welcome, sir.
The city's requesting approval of a three-lot land division from one existing parcel, which contains a total of about 98.5 acres. The petitioner is also applying for a variance from the subdivision regulations to allow the creation of a parcel with zero right-of-way frontage, where the code requires a minimum of 30 linear feet of right-of-way frontage for newly created parcels. Up on the screen, I have an aerial showing it with the three proposed parcels. Lot 1 being the bulk of Lakeshore Municipal Golf Course, sized at about 65.3 acres. Lot 2, which is proposed to be sold to Oshkosh Corporation, is sized at about 32.8 acres. And then down here, there's a little outlot, which is about 1/3 of an acre. As I mentioned, this is the Lakeshore Municipal Golf Course site, and it's a proposed location for Oshkosh Corporation's global headquarters. The property is currently zoned I institutional, but the proposed Lot 2 area is proposed to be rezoned to CBP PD, Corporate Business Park with a Planned Development Overlay. The 10 and 20-year comprehensive land use plan recommends commercial land use for Lot 2, and the remainder land of Lot 1 for parks, recreation, and open space use. The purpose of a land division is to enable the city to sell the 32.8 acre parcel to Oshkosh Corporation for the proposed global headquarters. Both lots, as you can see, are very irregularly shaped, with Lot 2 being enveloped by Lot 1 on all sides. Lot 1 will be retained by the city and for future recreational use. The CSM, let me see, the CSM also shows that outlot down here. The reason for the creation of the outlot is to indicate a future extension of Northwest Field Street from the south. The proposed CSM does not include all of the golf course over on the eastern section. There were a number of platted streets and alleys, and we could not find verification that these streets and alleys were ever officially vacated prior to the golf course development in the early 1900s. So early next year, we're going to go forward or move forward and officially vacate all these streets and alleys located over here, and eventually combine these lands with Lot 1. The subdivision variance request is for the creation of a landlocked parcel, which is Lot 2. As you can see, it does not have any right-of-way frontage at all. Staff is in support of the variance because we understand this is just a temporary situation until a street layout is designed and dedicated for and land is dedicated for street purposes. All three lots meet minimum zoning criteria for the I and CBP districts, and the Department of Public Works reviewed this CSM and does not have any concerns with the parcel layout. So with that, staff is in support or recommends approval of the three-lot land division and approval of the subdivision variance for creation of a parcel with no right-of-way frontage as requested.
Thank you. Technical questions? Jeffrey, and then Kathy, and then Ed.
Where's the part of the land that had the deed restriction on it? Is that is that incorporated into Lot 1?
It's
it's
in Lot 1.
Yeah, it's in.
All right, do we have to do anything, because we're putting a part of that was deed restricted along with a part that's not? Right?
So Lot
No.
2 is outside of that, outside.
No, I know that, but Lot 1, we're creating Lot 3. Isn't that area that's,
Let me go back.
yeah, Lot 1. Up at the top there is the deed restricted land, isn't that correct?
That's mostly located outside of the
Outside of
CSM
it.
over here. There is a little tiny portion of deed restricted land over here.
I was thinking up at the top. We don't have to do anything if there's deed restricted. We don't have to do anything to indicate that as part of these new CSM lot.
No, the deed restricted land's not part of the CSM.
And I assume then the size of these lots will meet if we do a new zoning, the new zoning coming up, it'll meet
Far
those
exceed.
sizes.
Yep.
Okay, gotcha.
Kathy, and then Ed.
Okay, you've got your cursor where I want to talk about. That's where eventually, early next year, you will incorporate that land into.
Into
Lot 1.
Lot 1, correct. Yeah, right now there's a bunch of alleys and streets, like, for example, North Eagle Street. Actually we're not sure if it's ever been officially vacated, but it extends all the way up to the shore of Fox River there. So we decided at this time just to cut it off on the western edge of the right-of-ways until we clear up the vacations over on this side.
Okay, and for the moment, Panoqua, outlined in red, the street that
We-
exists will remain?
Actually, we recently found out too that Ponoco was never dedicated up along here, so this right-of-way mapping is an error. I just haven't had a chance to update
Oh,
that.
okay, so,
Mhm.
anyway, well, that'll all be cleaned up at the same time
Yes. Mhm.
that we're doing that. And the other question is a little narrow strip between Lot 2, toward, Oshkosh Ave.
Oh, down here.
Yeah, that little narrow strip between the adjacent, yeah, that.
Mhm.
That's part of Lot 1?
Yes.
And how wide is that?
I believe 80 feet wide.
80 feet wide?
Mhm.
So it serves to,
I think potential street, Alan?
it serves to combine the two,
Street.
Connect
Yeah.
Mary
City
Jewel to,
parcels.
connect Mary Jewel to the west. Rather than having to go all the way up to the lake, we wanted to make sure there was a connection for Mary Jewel directly to the west.
okay, and then also from Mary Jewel north. So
Oh,
one can
yes.
access the entire public parcel
Yes,
using that corridor.
yes, yep.
Okay.
There's no dead ends.
And eventually, the extension of Rath Lane and/or Westfield will be carved out of the city portion of Lot 1 or out of part of Lot 2 or both?
Lot 1.
Lot 1, okay. Okay.
Ed?
Outlot 1 assumes an extension of Westfield, I presume? And we'll have our TIA when?
End of January, beginning of February. I think we're looking at I don't know if you've told the Plan Commission, we're looking at a joint meeting, I think January 30th.
No?
No,
No. I
Heck
guess,
surprised when Darren tells you that.
okay. I'm busy that night. Is there any reason we're not mapping that?
Because we're waiting until, I think we get a little bit further down the line so we know how the roads are actually gonna lay out. We don't, at this point, we've been working with the adjacent, well, with the interested party. They know about the city's plans to move, or wanting to extend North Westfield through there, so we didn't feel the need that we need to map it at this point, but it's something that we can consider. Alan,
At this point, I think the adjoining property is agreeable to the extension of Westfield because it serves their property as well. So they're motivated to do that as soon as the traffic impact analysis is completed as well.
Okay. I know we said this last week. I'm still a little apprehensive of doing something like this without knowing how it's gonna be served by roads. I mean, I understand that we're waiving sort of the subdivision requirements that we have right away in good faith, I guess, but it still makes me nervous that, I guess, the question of why.
In a perfect world, we would have had the traffic impact analysis done this last summer.
But I mean,
But-
why are we dividing the land right now?
Because we have to close on it in time to create the parcels for zoning and TIF purposes. If they don't exist January 1st, we can't do what we've proposed.
Got it. Okay.
Other technical
Makes
questions? Okay, seeing none, anyone here from the public to speak to this item today? Okay, public comment is closed. Back to the commission.
Move to approve. Second.
Any discussion on the motion? All right, call the roll.
Kiefer,
Aye.
Weigert,
Aye.
Ford,
Aye.
Bowen,
Aye.
Jones,
Aye.
Hintz,
Aye.
Cummings,
Aye.
Crop,
Aye.
Wojtek.
Aye.
Motion carried, 9-0.
Okay, moving on to item number 3, a residential design standards variance to allow a covered porch addition at the residence at 3063 Shadow Lane.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Bet.
So for this item, the petitioner is requesting a variance from the city's residential design standards to allow a porch addition at 3063 Shadow Lane on the front facade of the house. Currently, ordinance prohibits additions on the front facade, requires them to be located on the side or rear facades to minimize the impact on the architectural integrity of the home. This property is actually zoned SR5 single-family residential. All the immediate properties around it are single-family residential, and there should be maps in your packets that display the property. This property and the properties immediately to the north and south are also lakefront residential overlay because they are right along Lake Winnebago. So Lake Winnebago is to the east, and then Shadow Lane is to the west, I believe, of the property. I'm trying to think if there's a map in here. I don't know that there is. This here kind of shows an idea as to what they want to do, or shows an image as to what they want to do. They want to do a covered porch addition that would be on the front facade of the house, between the house and the detached garage. So this plan here shows the house plan, and you can kind of see, I don't know if there's a thing right here. Here's the detached garage. The street is to the south of the garage here, or actually to the, to the west of the garage. To the west of the garage. The orientation of this plan is different. Street is to the west of this garage, the detached garage here, and then the covered porch would be here, a 7-foot by 4-foot 6-inch porch addition. And it would be constructed of green treated lumber for the framing of the decking, and then Trex composite decking boards. And then it would have shakes and shingle for the roofing and siding, so it'd try to match the house. Going back to the perspective, this kind of shows you a pretty good image as to what they want to do. They'd have like a 12-inch overhang on each side. They'd have that Trex decking, and then they would also have the aluminum balusters, top and bottom rails, etc. The reason for wanting to do this is to enhance the architectural integrity of their home, but also for safety purposes. They want to keep rainwater, sleet, ice, etc., snow off of the deck there, entering into that entryway there. They have a special needs son too, so they said that for his safety, it would also be, it'd have a positive impact. Elevation here, this is the side elevation of the house. The lake would be over here, and then the detached garage would be over here, with the street further west. So staff looked at this and evaluated it, and we did not feel that it would be detrimental to the architectural integrity of the house to permit this variance. If it was to be permitted, we would expect that there would be 2 conditions. So 1, the new porch addition would meet all applicable building codes concerning dimensioning of the steps, railing heights, etc. And then 2, the front porch addition would meet design standards for porches visible from the street. That garage between the street and the house would kind of screen it a bit, but you'd still be able to see it depending on the angle. So anything about top and bottom rails, balusters, consistent in appearance with materials to the rest of the house, that would apply here. As I said, we did not find that it would be contrary to the public interest to allow it.
All right, technical questions. Seeing none, anyone here from the public to speak to this item today? Okay, back to the commission.
Motion to approve.
Any discussion on the motion? None? Okay, call the roll, please.
Kiefer,
Aye.
Weigert,
Aye.
Ford,
Aye.
Bowen,
Aye.
Helms,
Aye.
Hintz, Cummings,
Aye.
Trop,
Aye.
and Foytek.
Aye.
Motion carried, 801.
Okay, moving on, item number 4. Approval of a general development plan and specific implementation plan for placement of a new maintenance garage building at 500 South Oakwood Road at the Mercy Medical Center.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
You're welcome.
So here we have the subject site with the existing land use map. As you can see, it is a mixture of residential and commercial land uses in the area. We're right on the edge of city limits here, so we do have a mixture of some county single-family zoning districts immediately to the kind of the northwest, some city zoning to the south. We also have two multifamily zoning adjacent to this. We have some MR12 immediately north and to the south. To the southeast side of the site, we kind of have a mixture of other similar medical uses and commercial uses existing. Here we have an area of the site, so we kind of want to highlight the location of a relatively large parcel where this is going. It's going at the extreme edge of their current parking lots. They kind of have a trail for people who are both employees and people who are using the facility. So it's going kind of right adjacent to that trail. That trail actually is part of this project, is proposed to be relocated around this new building. They're currently planning to remodel where the existing maintenance facility is in the current building, and proposing to build this new maintenance garage and salt storage shed. So here we're just kind of zooming in a little bit so you can see the area we're talking about. It's on the very edge of the site. They do own significant property yet to the east of the location. So here's the proposed site plan. They're proposing to build a 55 by 70 square foot proposed maintenance garage. It is a prefab building that they want to use. They are going to be running new mechanicals out to the building through the existing parking lot. And then just north of the proposed maintenance building, there's the new small storage building as well. So here's some kind of elevation drawings of the prefab building that they would like to construct. It is a maintenance shed for the facility. After reviewing this and looking at it, the staff feels that the proposed location is rather remote on the site. It's not going to be overly visible. So we didn't have a lot of concerns with the existing or the type of structure being proposed. We did want to evaluate the land use and the parking side of things. They are losing approximately 23 stalls with the construction of this building. Reviewing it, they presently have 1,285 stalls. Code requirement is only 1050, so they are still significantly over the required parking for the facility, even with the loss of this. The current site plan is deficient in the current landscaping ordinance, so staff would like to condition this that they will have to meet current code requirements for foundation and building landscaping. Right now, they're indicating about 3 plantings that are being lost when they build the building, and they wanted to replace just those 3. Staff feels it would be appropriate for a new building to be landscaped up to our current code requirements. So they would need to do a little bit additional landscaping, but we're looking at about 28 points worth of foundation, 86 points worth of yard. Not a huge number, but at least it would be compliant with our code at that point. So staff is recommending approval of both the general development plan and the specific implementation plan, with that one stipulation that the formal submittal for site plan review does have a code compliant landscaping plan.
Thank you. Technical questions? Ed?
I don't, on the current site plan, and this may be a question for the petitioner if they're here, I don't see any additional lighting as part of that.
So they did submit a photometric plan with us.
Okay.
It is code compliant with the site. I did not put it in the slide, but their lighting plan would maintain current code standards.
So my concern is I guess less about code compliance and more about the fact that we're kind of creating a pretty decent blind spot back there.
Okay.
Is there going to be any additional lighting? Because I'm imagining the parking lot lighting is going to remain, so the parking lot lighting will be compliant still. I'm not sure that I wouldn't want to see more lighting on the far
On the
side of
east
that
side of the
building.
building. Yeah, I
as
have
that
the
walking path.
I'll
goes
have to look
around.
at the photometric plan. I know the light does spill over a distance, exactly how far off the top of my head, but I'm sure the petitioner looks
Right,
like he's ready to
maybe
answer it
better.
for you.
Maybe a better
This whole-
person to ask that.
Just to clarify, there are lights that totally surround the building. So we are adding lights to the building, aiming towards where the walking path will be.
Okay.
And there will be cameras out there. Those aren't shown on there, but from a security perspective, we're doing
Thank you,
that
sir.
as well.
Sorry.
That's all right. It's all Ed's fault. Any other technical questions?
I know, I'm
Jeff.
just hijacking everything.
Couple, we're adding additional impervious, and I get these.
So the net change is not that much. DPW did review it and note that they are under the threshold for change.
For the
So
clean water.
Yep.
Not for water
So-
water runoff. And
the basin was, sounds like originally sized to cover this. I know Steve is here, I believe, where he was. He can probably better answer that. I checked their comments and they did not have any concerns with it.
Sit as far in the back as he can.
To the site specific, I can't give you an answer as I'm not familiar with that, but staff routinely reviews these to ensure that the stormwater management plan that was submitted for it does have adequate capacity when they are adding impervious area. Since the site had to meet stormwater management originally, any additional impervious area would have to be managed per the city ordinances.
the second question is, why did staff not have any concerns that we're putting up a big metal building? Instead of having something that's more aesthetically, not necessarily appealing, but in aesthetics to the rest of the development that's there.
When the code was written to add a lot of our design standards that we have now, institutional district was not added as having any additional standards. So when we looked at this facility with its distance from the building, the sea of parking, the intended use of the structure, we kind of saw that what the goal of their doing here was maybe not necessarily needed to.
Yeah, but this, we have new zoning, right?
Yep.
This falls under new zoning.
Yep, and then
Has our
the new zoning that we put in place.
Yeah, which has our new,
Institutional-
incorporates our new standards and all that stuff.
Institutional does not have any elevated standards under the new district.
So we're okay with creating a big-ass metal building in close proximity to residential and other areas of the city. That makes like 0 sense to me. I mean, we wouldn't allow other people to do this.
Do you have any?
Well,
additional-
I
think
don't
we were looking
understand
at
why
the-
we would allow them to do this. That is a planned development, if I remember right. So-
You're definitely within your right to
Yeah, I mean,
ask for more.
That's correct. I think we looked at it, the location and site proximity, the vegetation around it, size.
yeah, but we're not thinking about the lot that's next door. You know, that's
To the
towards
north.
Witzel.
To the north, sure.
Yeah, to the north, that's for sale.
Across
And
the
what's going to
retention
go
pond.
in there, and now all of a sudden, they're,
Pond?
yeah, over towards Witzel, as you go
To the
towards
north.
Witzel.
Wait,
That lot that goes all the way over to Witzel, that's for sale.
Correct.
And so what I'm thinking, Ed, is that, you know, whatever development's gonna go over there, they're gonna inherit a sizable, not aesthetically appealing metal building. And I'm just asking is why are we looking at allowing a big metal building rather than using some of the same design characteristics that are in the existing, property? I mean, that
Under-
doesn't make sense to me.
It's under your purview to require a higher standard.
Nobody else has a concern.
I think
I know.
from the staff's perspective, the location, landscaped appropriately, we didn't feel it was gonna have that great of an impact. But as it is a PD,
big building.
so it's definitely within this board's purview to,
Well, I'm just saying, that's a big building. It's, what, 70 feet long and 55 feet wide? I mean, that's a big building with a lot of square footage that's one of our workshops we're talking about,
Correct.
standing metal roof, and this is gonna have a big metal roof,
Correct.
which we say in our workshop, our design standards don't allow for in residential.
residential, correct?
Residential areas, correct.
This is close, I just don't get it.
All right.
Maybe the rest of you do, I just don't get it.
We'll get to it later, I'm sure. Other technical questions? Okay, seeing none, anyone here from the public to speak to this item today? Perhaps the petitioner would like to step back up so we can shoot a couple more questions here. Okay. State just your name and address, please.
Name is Tom Labs. I'm the facility director at Mercy Medical Center and also the project manager for this project.
Okay.
And I'd like to make just one comment.
Go right ahead.
But the site doesn't really look like that anymore. It's heavily wooded on all sides. Franciscan Court Sisters of Sorrowful Mothers are directly behind us. directly behind that location. We've taken great measures into making the metal that will be on that building match the metal that is on the existing hospital now. There'll be two tones, the roof being one and the sides being another, and those are the match to the hospital metal that's there now. And it's very important from us, from an aesthetic standpoint, for this to look not like just a big garage, because you can see it from the bed towers. So it's important to us from a patient standpoint that it's very aesthetic, and that's what the plans call for.
Okay, questions for the petitioner, as long as he is up here? Okay, thank you, sir. Anyone else here to speak to this item today? Come on up, sir.
First time, bear with me. I hope I'm
Don't
not
worry about
wasting
it.
your time.
We're patient. Name and address, please.
Brian Emmerich, 427 West 17th Avenue, Oshkosh, Wisconsin. This is more a general question, but this is a very good specific to ask to this situation. I'm curious about how you come about deciding what's aesthetically pleasing. As a homeowner, I certainly understand if somebody put something like this in my backyard, in opposed to having a building, I've got a parking lot to look at. How do you figure out how to draw the line there as to what's good and what's not? What are we going to allow? What are we not going to allow? Because if, and I'm not certainly arguing the point, I'm literally curious how you come about that.
I think this has been an ongoing discussion in this board.
Usually Jeff and I just argue back and forth.
Is that how it works?
Until, like, one of us badgers
But I
the
do
other
think-
into agreeing,
well,
so-
I mean, it's a
can-
tough one. It's a tough call because aesthetics is
I
very
think-
subjective.
I think something that the petitioner just said, like matching colors, matching materials, that kind of thing. Is it consistent with the area? Is it consistent with the primary building on the site? Those kinds of things primarily.
Yeah, when we talk about aesthetics, especially the conversations we've had over the last year, we talk about using similar building materials, like you
Right.
said, the color approaches, things of that nature.
So it's not necessarily that the building could be there. It could be okay as long as it was done appropriately
Yeah,
to match
all
the
kinds of
surrounding.
buildings are.
A good example is the city garage.
Yeah.
Okay.
The
Yeah.
first one they brought to us
Some of us really like it.
was
Some of us hate it.
Well, no, I mean, the first rendering they brought to us wasn't up to a standard that we would have
Right.
wanted, so we made it better. And I think you got a very nice looking building that doesn't look like a city garage. You can have a maintenance building like this is proposed that doesn't have to look like a maintenance building by using, whether they come up at how far, what's the knee height? Knee wall, type of the same type of brick material with the same color, like you're talking about. That's two-tone colors, and then you add landscaping around that. Now all of a sudden you got an aesthetically appealing building rather than build a metal shed, and that just sits there with no landscaping or anything like that, which we probably would have allowed 10 years ago.
Sure.
Or minimal.
So it's not necessarily against the building itself.
No, it's not.
You could pretty much, as long as the person building the building were willing to put the extra money in to make it look good.
Yeah.
You could
Yeah.
pretty much get it done.
Yeah.
Just a matter of what it looks like.
The other point that we always look at too is contextual. So we're going to look at the context of where they're going to put it, that neighborhood, that area. What is it up against? Is it up against a bunch of homes? Is it sitting out in kind of the middle? Is it nowhere land? So we're looking at all those things as well, which is part of the reason why we have the meetings, to hear some of the public comments on it. If there's a lot of concerns coming from neighbors, things like that, that's the purpose, and it is relatively subjective, as you're going to see some of the
Well, and that's why I brought up
conversations we have.
the property to the west, because it's for sale. We don't know what's gonna go there. It could be commercial, which then they don't have as much of a problem. Could be residential, which then they may have a problem, but they're gonna inherit it because it's already gonna be there.
But there's no hard and fast standards, if
Right.
that's what you're asking.
Okay, no, that's,
Yeah.
I'm getting an education here. This
Yeah.
is my first one, so thank you for your.
And it could have been, on an institutional district, we didn't keep that into the design standards, and maybe that was a miss potentially on our part. We'd have to evaluate that again. I don't,
Is there any other ones that you could think of that we didn't include?
not really. I mean, we have some residential design standards, but commercial and industrial are covered.
Institutional is really the one that we did not.
Anybody else from the audience here to speak to this item today? Okay, seeing on back to the commission, let's chat, folks.
to approve.
I'll second.
It's been moved and seconded. Discussion. Kathy?
I respect Jeff's point, but I like the fact that the materials are going to be similar to the current hospital. The colors are going to be pretty much identical, and it seems to me that that's a Sawyer Creek, basically running through the backyard of Mercy, and that's quite a distance. It's a nice buffer. So I think I will approve this.
Okay. I would agree with what Kathy said. I spent a lot of time back there with my dog, and I think it's going to be okay. Any other comments or questions about this? All right, call the roll.
Kiefer,
Aye.
Weigert,
Aye.
Ford,
Aye.
Bowen,
Aye.
Holmes,
Aye.
Ince,
Aye.
Cummings,
Aye.
Trop,
Aye?
Voitek.
Aye.
Motion carried 9-0.
Moving on to item 5, approve new zoning ordinance district, section 30 to 59, corporate business park CBP.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
You bet.
This you've seen before. We've had the workshops on it at previous meetings. We've tried to boil down some of the comments that we've heard at these last few meetings in developing this new ordinance. We understand there'll be some discussion and some concern about some of the uses that were in there, but this is what, the proposal that we have right now is based on some of those comments that we heard. What we tried to do when we created this new zoning ordinance is we tried to create a hybrid between the business park and the SMU. We thought the SMU allowed too many uses, and we thought the corporate business park allowed too many uses. So we kind of restricted some of that, created less permitted uses and more conditional uses. And then at the same time, we heard some of the concerns about the quality and what we want on this gateway corridor. So what we did with this ordinance is we really kind of upped the architectural standards. So if you look at what we've proposed in this district, and we'll get to it, it's got our, from what I can, it's our highest architectural standards that we have in the community will be located in this district. We've had some comments with some of the Plan Commission members, and some the name corporate business park might be a bit of a misnomer, and maybe we should look at changing that. We still have some time to change that at some point. Does it really do what we're intending it to do by allowing so many commercial uses in that area? We allow a lot of uses. We could look at that. We could change it at some point over time. Right now, we're looking at those base standards, and that's what we're going to go over here, and what we're requesting that you adopt. So with that, we'll go. I'll go over kind of the sections in the new code. Intent: the district is intended to accommodate high-quality corporate, business, and office uses. And this is where some of the concern got raised, because we had that whole menu of conditional uses that are allowed in there, with supportive retail and commercial land uses at an intensity that is compatible with the overall community character of the city. If I had another 6 months, if we had another 6 months, we could create 2 different zones. We could create something special along Oshkosh Ave, and we could create another one on the golf course. It's just that we don't have that time right now, so what we did was we took a look and created what we thought was the best zone at this point. Permitted uses by right. So you come in here, if it's not zone PD, here's the other thing. Everything in the area is going to be zone PD. So everything is going to require Plan Commission, Common Council review at some point down the line. Unless we can approve a development plan for a site, and they can phase it in over time. But at the end of the day, they're going to be coming through getting a development plan approved by the city of Oshkosh. Principal uses permitted by right, office uses, and then professional services. And in fact, this is an old, I had an old copy that I was making adjustments from. If you look at the new one in your handout on page 3, we actually say, we specifically say under number 1, commercial or industrial office. So we want to make it clear both of those type of offices could locate in this district. There's, at the end of the day, an office, whether it's an industrial office or a commercial office, are generally the same, but we just want to make it clear that you can locate those offices in this district. They are offices at professional service. This is where we kept professional service separated from personal service, and we continue to do that with the new ordinance. Conditional uses, this is where we probably had the most discussion as a Plan Commission about what are the uses that are permitted to come and locate in here as a conditional use. You can see principal uses permitted as a conditional use. That means they have to come to the Plan Commission for approval. These uses are generally intended to support employees and customers of principal uses located in the district. And we added this as well as the broader neighborhood around the district. So when we were looking at uses that are to go in this particular area as a conditional use, we're trying to evaluate things that serve that kind of that neighborhood. We're not looking at, I don't think we're looking at those more regional things, like big boxes, things like that. We'd like to have more specialty retail, things like that. Things that drive foot traffic. Indoor sales and service, physical activity studios. This is the one that we've had a lot of discussion on, drive-through and in-vehicle sales. Examples of such land uses include, but are not limited to, drive-in facilities, drive-through facilities, and fuel stations. Restaurants, personal service, commercial indoor lodging, that's your hotels. And this is where we made a change from last time because we heard some concerns about including that light industrial as a use in there. So what we did was we included light industrial where 50% of the floor area of the principal building is devoted to a use permitted by right within the district. So that, so you'd have to have, it would have to be a mixed use building. So we're thinking things like, things that you see like tap houses. That could potentially be a light industrial operation. What was the term that we're using that we're going to be probably looking at doing a code change? What's happening is you're seeing more craft brewers, more types of light manufacturing operations that sell their products up front, like a Oaks or a Hughes or things like that. So we were trying to keep, that was kind of in our mind when we were developing
Manufacturing retailers.
Manufacturing retailers. So I think at some point we're going to come back and take a look at the code on
You
that.
guys invent that term?
No, he actually brought it from Indiana. So,
I like it.
I stole it.
so parking lots, off-site structured parking, outdoor open space, institutional, passive outdoor recreation. Prohibited uses. This is the first time we really had a prohibited use because I know, again, there was concerns about some of the things that could locate in here, what we're trying to achieve. We heard that there was concerns about car washes, so we prohibited those. Tattoo parlor, body piercing, tobacco and paraphernalia shops, and adult use, adult bookstores. So we put that in as prohibited uses. So if you wanted to come in and put those uses in, we have a code that says, no, we don't want those. It'd be pretty difficult for you to get that in as a use in this area because we're specifically saying we want to prohibit it.
What would happen to the one that's already there?
It would be-
that wants to be rebuilt?
Rebuilt is one thing they can maintain. This is the conversation that we're going to have on some of those uses on the next item on here. But a non-conforming use, I forget what the specific code is on that. If it's burned by more than 50%, that has to be rebuilt. It has to go back to the underlying district, so it'd have to go away. Exterior materials. This is where we tried to get a higher quality, higher level of standard within the zoning district. Commercial buildings shall be clad on all sides with at least 75% Class 1 materials. So it becomes a 75-25 mix, which is a lot, that's 25% more than our existing. I think our existing is what, 50? Relatively 50-50. So you're going to increase the amount of Class 1 materials there on the structure. Building composition, again, this is a new kind of a new concept for us that we're including in this district. All buildings shall be designed with four-sided detail, have a distinct base, middle, and top. So that's that 360 architecture. The building looks good from all sides in this district, and then it has the distinct zones on the building facade. Buildings continue, door and window openings. What we did here is this is new windows and doors or other openings at ground floor level shall comprise at least 40% of the area of the street-facing facade. We've had discussion, could they be spandrel windows, things like that. Those are things that we consider as part of the planned development, things like that. We still want that window, but it could potentially be a spandrel, something like that.
Did you define what street-facing facade is if there are two streets? Or we say primary or?
Nope, no, we will, there's primary in here and we'll get to that on some of the other things, but for this particular provision, we said anything that's facing the street. Facade length shall not be greater than 40 feet without articulation, and that's down from our 70 feet right now. Right now it's 70 feet, we're just reducing it to more compartmentalize the building, the buildings that will be out there. Accessory structures, this is where we where we include the language, materials used to construct accessory structures such as trash enclosures and signage shall include materials and colors that are consistent with the principal building. That's relatively new. Parking, this is one that we had a lot of discussion on as well, and we made a subtle change here. We did make a change. A maximum of 25% of the required on-site parking shall be located between an arterial street and the principal building. There's concerns about being on a corner lot, being on something that's not an arterial. We were trying to protect that main arterial into the street. So in this case, the arterial street would be Oshkosh Avenue coming in there. So you wouldn't have the park. You'd have to put the parking behind the building on Oshkosh Avenue. That's what it's meant to. Landscaping in the setback area between the street frontage and principal building shall include large contiguous planting. We actually started to put some points in here because you guys asked us, well, what does that mean? How much do we have to put in the yards? So what we did is we said 50% of the yard landscape points as required by section 30-253 shall be placed along the street frontage. So right now with the code, you can put it pretty much anywhere in the yard. What we want to do is take 50% of the points and say you shall put them along that street frontage, again, to get more vegetation, landscaping, blah, blah, blah up front.
So if someone was on a corner, they would have 100% of their yard landscaping on those two frontage?
Just 50%.
50% of.
Would be between those two.
Remember, there's two other yards involved.
So if they're on that corner, they would have 25% here and 25% here instead of 50%?
60-40, then they would have some flexibility.
Okay,
And just 50% of the total points they're required. So if they're required 100-yard landscaping points, 50%. 50 of those points have to be located now along the street frontages.
okay. I was just trying to wrap my mind around it. 'Cause
No,
all of a sudden you're
corner-
going from 50, 50, 50 in the
corner
front.
lots are always
You
a
got
pain.
25 in the front, or
That math got me too.
We think theoretically it works out.
I think
On the stormwater,
so does electricity.
remember we discussed the stormwater.
Yeah.
About potentially allowing, or I guess we're saying that if they want to put a water feature in their building in between and it's aesthetically appealing, they can't do it.
You're gonna have to come through the PD and get that relief through the PD. Again, in this district, pretty much everything's gonna be zone plan development as proposed. So what we didn't, we were having a hard time coming up and writing an actual standard
No,
for
I
what your
get that.
concept
No,
is.
I get what you're saying, because, I mean, there's a stormwater detention, which is our de facto standard with the natural plantings,
Yeah.
which may not be
Yep.
aesthetically
Yep.
appealing, and
Correct.
then there's something, that's done really nicely, that has waterfalls or whatever, that everybody would like to see.
Yep, and I think we're having a harder time writing that particular standard. There's some models out there that we're gonna look at next year, but we'd rather negotiate back into allowing
No,
that.
that's okay.
Stormwater retention facilities shall not be placed in the setback area between the principal building and the primary street frontage. We could have actually, if we wanted to, I think we're gonna still maintain that primary, whether it's a secondary street or it's Oshkosh Ave. I think we still have that preference that we want those things, unless they're of the quality that Jeff is talking, somewhere else on the site. Trade dress, this was a new one. We've made some adjustments. Trade dress and signage. We've made some adjustments based on the comments that we heard. The trade dress branding is not a detriment from the building form and architecture. Again, as we're going to be reviewing all these coming through, that's what we're going to look at to make sure it's not a detriment. And then trade dress branding is consistent with or complementary to the forms, colors, and textures of the principal buildings in the area. So we're going to be looking at it to make sure it's consistent with that area. Those are, we'll make that finding that it's consistent, not detrimental to other buildings in the area. What we peeled back off of was maxing them out at 2 per building. Now you could have as many in there as possible as you want, but again, they're going to come back through for this review for appropriateness. That's where it becomes a little bit subjective, and it's going to require them to provide us with the colors of the buildings in the area, the materials, that kind of stuff. Signage, we're making a couple tweaks to the signage. Signage shall be the same as the business park. In Article 10 signage, except the following provisions: no pylon, cabinet, or electronic message boards are prohibited. Again, the existing stuff that's in there, you can replace it, replace faces, stuff like that. New stuff that's going up, you're not going to have. We're proposing not to allow that. sorry, Ed, kept in the EMCs in there. Monument signs, maximum of 10 foot in height. And again, that 10 foot starts at the middle of the center line of the road. It's not from the ground elevation to the center
Is
line
that
of the
gonna
road.
be identified that way, so there's no misunderstanding?
It's in our code, it's in the signage code that way. Lastly, the last change, this is the bulk intensity and intensity and bulk regulations for the district. We didn't make too many changes between the base district business park and this one. The only change that we made was we heightened, we increased the height to 65 feet. Everything else remains the same, setbacks, all that all remains the same.
65 feet, is that basically 3-story?
That would, no, that's.
6-story.
That would be 6 stories, but
10 feet.
with today's tech, with modern buildings now, kind of with commercial, you have larger, kind of higher ceilings. Ed's disagreeing, but probably 4 to 6, somewhere
4 to
in there,
6.
depending
4
on
to
how.
6 feet, okay.
Correct.
Darren, is that the building, so HVAC is on top of
Yes,
that?
yes. Yeah, we allow those to encroach into that area.
What's the minimum?
There is no minimum height.
We could wind up with a bunch of 1-story.
Yeah, theoretically.
Want that?
I guess we're gonna have that conversation.
Well, it's all planned development.
Yeah, it is planned development, and again, we're gonna look at everything contextually and put it together. I think some, you're gonna have some 1 stories, but you're gonna have others that are gonna be in 3 and 4 stories. I don't think we're gonna have a bunch of 5-story buildings in there. I just don't, I don't see that occurring, but maybe others will in the room that we're talking to. Let's have that discussion.
Go ahead.
I'm looking at page 3, and in C3, it's saying drive-through in vehicles.
Then you're back to the conditional uses.
Right, it strikes me as, it's gonna look like the frontage road with a bunch of fast food places and gas stations. Do we want that on a gateway?
That's where we had that whole discussion on what use versus architectural quality, and could we mesh those up? And that's why we, when we built the code and we increased the architectural standards and building placement and things like that, I think we thought that, and reduce some of that signage, we thought that they could coexist if the quality was there. But, I would defer some of the other members. We had a lot of talk on that.
Well, since I lost control of this agenda
yeah.
item, I was going to say, are there technical questions? But it sounds like everybody's moved beyond technical questions to general discussion.
I actually saved my
Do we-
technical questions,
Okay,
so
let's.
I do have a.
Okay, are there technical questions? Mike, you're after Ed, and then Mike first?
I'll defer.
Okay.
The 25% on-site parking requirement, is that, excuse my ignorance, but in a planned development, is that something we'd be able to tweak to the specific development? Okay, sounds good.
Ed?
I had 2 sort of technical ones and then just a general one. The monument signs have a maximum, pylon signs are prohibited, monument signs have a 10-foot maximum height. Do we allow for the parcels adjacent to the 41, to Highway 41, if I'm looking at this, those sites redevelop, are those then considered part of the 41? I know we don't technically have an overlay, right? What do we have there now? We have a permitted sign height along 41 that's taller than.
Yeah, but we have that.
This
is more restrictive.
This would
so
supersede that.
This would supersede it. So this would be the governing ordinance, but again, you're coming back through the plan development. If it does make sense in some of those places, potentially along the corridor where the 41 is so high coming through there that you might want to look at
I
that.
mean, what's the point of a 10-foot monument sign?
Yeah,
right there.
exactly. But
I
again,
don't-
it's hard to write a
I don't-
code to fit every situation right in this little corridor even.
Right, and I think that's why I have some misgivings about this particular vehicle that we're using to legislate a really, really specific area. Because it is usurping other parts of the code that were written for very different purposes than what we're trying to do here. So I don't know how I reconcile support for the vast majority of this stuff with something that's going to impact and cause an unintended consequence. You tell me, how does that sound? You know what I'm saying? I mean, I don't necessarily know how to vote for something that accomplishes, I think, what we're trying to accomplish, but also takes away something that I think is some settled principle that we've got, which is, within the 41 corridor, the characteristics of development along Highway 41, immediately adjacent to Highway 41, abutting 41, is very different than what we're looking for 100 feet from 41, 100 yards, a quarter mile, a mile.
I also just don't want to put it in there except for a corridor, in this particular part of the code. You're right. I mean, we're trying to, this one is becoming more restrictive in this area of the community, but we've built a code that, we're trying to be able to, we think that we could also replicate this code in other parts of the community.
Yeah, and I don't disagree with that. You have written it broadly enough, and I think we had that conversation in our workshops about trying to do that. I think for the most part, you guys really did an admirable job in making it applicable to other places. That's one thing that I think causes a little bit of a problem.
Yeah, I think the use of adding the PD on this is what we're viewing as that way to reconcile some of those unique characteristics that may come up with some of these sites. At least there's an avenue that we can use to...
Which is fine, but that's not a lot of comfort for somebody who owns one of those properties and has to potentially sell or redevelop or something like that, and has to go on faith that me and David, who's going to be 115 years old and still on the plan commission when that happens, like that we're going to be reasonable in our old age to say yes. That's what concerns me. And I don't, like I said, I don't know how to reconcile a vote in favor of this with something like that.
Ed, are you specifically thinking about the existing businesses that are along 41 that are going to be
literally
capsuled in this?
Adjacent. Yeah, the parcels that are adjacent to Highway 41 that we're sort of sucking into this, which I get why we're doing. I'm not saying we shouldn't do it. It just concerns me that we're taking away something maybe as an unintended consequence.
But on the other hand, you still do maintain that non-conforming, that non-conforming status, so you can maintain those signs, you can, do all that.
Yeah, I know, it's just not a lot of comfort. If I'm that property owner, that's not a lot of comfort to me. And in a meaningful way. I mean, I know that we have this kind of joking argument that you and I have different views of signage, but we have very different views of signage because along interstate highways, the single most valuable portion of your property is the interstate visibility and the ability to put a sign on it. So, I mean, that's not something that I guess I take that lightly.
No, but it's also, this area is also more difficult and why the PD is even more appropriate here is because of the height of the highways,
Yeah, I agree with that.
So it creates a unique situation that I would think that I would think we're generally reasonable when it comes to these things, but
you are.
This area is so unique that I don't even know how I would write a code. Because we've talked to the owners over by La Quinta and Two Brothers, and they have issues with signage, even getting their signs up there.
Right.
With our existing code, that doesn't work for them.
Right.
So.
No, and yeah, I know the DOT didn't do any favors. I understand that as well. But.
So I think that's another one of those factors that there's so many unique. There's a couple unique conditions here that was just hard for us to write a code that was all encompassing.
Okay. Sorry, my other question was about trade dress. Do we define trade dress anywhere?
That's a good question.
Is that defined in any corner of our zoning code anywhere?
No,
Or
it's
is
not.
trade dress I know it when I see it?
No, I
thing?
defined that in the workshop, and I didn't I didn't put that as a definition. We went to a standard planning definition of it.
Yeah, and I'm probably okay with a standard planning definition. I think we should just be careful.
Yep, no.
Trade
understood.
dress can mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people.
No, you're right. We should probably add something, some discussion on trade dress somewhere.
Yeah, okay.
David, and then Mayor Cummings.
I find this discussion about the signs interesting, but where does it belong in this? Is it the technical part, or do we wait that for general discussion? But I have three questions. One, I'd like to have a better idea of what we're talking is permissible for branding signs. And then, do we address any place outdoor storage and vending machines?
Mark and I had a discussion of that today about, we would consider what, as to number 2, outdoor, incidental outdoor display, and that's limited to 200 square feet. So 200 square feet, you could have 250. You could, that's permitted. If we wanted to back that out, we could make that a prohibited use as well.
Okay, and just, my bias is that, especially where you have Q stores, that there's no outdoor storage, that you don't wind up and see boxes of firewood and salt and all that it's just no outdoor storage of anything, even if it's a temporary sale. And then secondly, no outdoor vending machines, because they're no more than signage.
And as to number 1, I think we were trying to get at that with that trade dress, that branding. I think that's what we're trying to get at. If we're not, tell me what I'm not sure.
No, but what is, when we're looking at branding, you can have a band around a canopy, but then you can have a bunch of signs. Or how many signs can a motel have on it, or,
Or
they have one on every corner of the building, or?
Well, whatever the underlying zoning ordinance would permit, you could get in this particular district, with the exception of the restrictions that we've placed for
Monument signs.
for monument EMCs and cabinet signs.
So currently the code for commercial land uses for wall signage would permit you a wall sign on every side of the building at 1 square foot of signage per linear foot of building, up to a 30% maximum total facade coverage. That's the current code requirements for facade signage in the city.
And remember, when we updated the ordinance, we did take that back, because we allowed a significant more area of signage in the community for wall signs and for pylon signs. We did peel that back quite a bit.
Now, in this code, we've also excluded cabinet signs. So a predominant style of wall signs you see is those cabinet signs. We have disallowed those in this district. So business would be restricted to like pin-mounted letters for the name of the business, or channel letters for the name of the business. They couldn't put up a large cabinet sign.
That's almost a de facto restriction on signage, to be honest.
Still a big sign.
It's still a big sign.
It becomes really cost inefficient to do a channel letter sign that's that. Nobody will spend the money to do it. But I understand what you're saying.
Okay, let's move on to mayor comments, and then Jeff.
All right, a couple of comments. While we're calling this a corporate business park, it still, as we've discussed, is a gateway into the city. And we've received criticism over the years about 9th Avenue is no grade shakes. Coming in on Jackson is no grade shakes. You have to go past the prison. You have to go past a landfill. South Park is a little bit better, but we've had a lot of complaints about the gateways into the city. They're not very inviting. And I think this is a chance for us to do it right, set the standards for our gateways. And as time evolves, how do we want to restructure a 9th? How do we want to restructure a Jackson and so forth to make it more? This is curb appeal. This is our best foot forward. Is this accomplishing it? Are we going to wind up with it looking like a frontage road? And I don't, the council members I've talked to, they're wanting high standards. To them, it is a gateway into the community. And I think I would rather see us approach it from the standpoint, what will make that the most prominent gateway into the city? Is this doing it? Or are we going to wind up with it looking like a frontage road?
I think from that aspect, put the use aside for just for a moment. What we're requiring or proposing with the architectural standards, with the landscaping, with the parking. We looked at all those elements of, like what AmFam has. I don't know if Epic has that stuff, but we looked at some of the higher, some of those other quality developments that we've seen in the state, and we think that our architectural standards get at that. We think that, we think that this is going to be, as right now proposed, you map it, if it gets done, it's going to have your highest architectural quality. It's going to have the least amount of signage that's allowed in the commercial district. So I think from that standpoint, we are going to that level. Whether, some of those uses, we put in some of those, proposing to prohibit some of those more noxious uses that we've heard complaints about in the corridor. So we prohibited some of those. So I think, is there still is there still a menu of uses in there? Yeah, there's quite a menu of uses in there. We think that we put enough design controls to get at those. But again, that becomes a decision of you guys after we have you and the Common Council, or ultimately the Common Council after we have this discussion.
I guess I would feel more comfortable if we saw some examples of communities that have done just a heck of a good job with it. Even you had some examples at the last meeting of good design and not so good design.
Mm-hmm.
And I think as we go forward, we should look at communities that have done just a first-class job with their gateways.
Jeff?
Yeah, I want to get back to the signage, the comment that you made. The underlying zoning that is going to control the signage. Well, this is the underlying zoning if we're going to create this new zoning ordinance. So I'm questioning, and I agree with kind of David. Up to 30% of the side of a building is signed. I don't get that at all. I wouldn't do that to the mayor's point, in this particular district as a gateway, wouldn't allow that kind of amount of signage. Now, Ted's point, is anybody going to do that? No, probably not. But the fact that they can doesn't make a lot of sense to me, that we should, again, be looking at that and saying, hey, does that make sense? It may make sense for certain areas, along the 41 corridor and stuff. And to the point, there's parts of the 41 corridor that I don't particularly care for, but it's a hodgepodge of things. It's big boxes, it's a lot of things that's developed over 20, 30 years. There's parts of the 41 corridor that actually are aesthetic, I don't think are that bad looking. It's nicely landscaped, the buildings are nice. Some of the newer stuff that's been done in the last 5, 6, 7 years, there's some nice parts to it. It's not very cohesive, to the mayor's point. But I'm just kind of curious. We say, okay, there's existing ordinances that we have, and I guess, did you guys look at those existing ordinances rather than just say, okay, we have one? The landscape one, I think, is pretty good, and I don't mind using, that landscape ordinance. The PD to allow, ponds and all that kind of stuff, if they're aesthetically pleasing, I get. But for somebody to say, well, geez, I'm gonna put up this sign because I can, now we can always throttle it back because it is a PD.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm wondering if we shouldn't have something in here that says, this is a more appropriate signage for this particular area. I don't know what that is.
So here's, I think,
30% ain't it.
Yeah, here's, I think, the best answer I can give you. We rolled it back to 30% with this code change in 2017.
No,
so it's
I know
less
that.
than we had. We haven't fully seen the impact of it because we haven't enough development that's went with wall signage route to see how that 30% has looked compared to what the previous code allowed. Now, 30% is still high compared to some other municipalities. I know there's a lot of places that like on a front facade may limit it to 15%, for example. So is it appropriate in this district to roll that back even farther? It very well may be. We looked at it kind of as perspective. We haven't seen the full impact of what going back to 30% has been. And we've traditionally, what we see is cabinet signs are the ones that are very large. When somebody tries to go max out their wall signage, it's with cabinet signs. When people use your pin-mounted, your raceway signs, as Ed kind of noted, they're generally of a smaller variety. So we kind of looked at, we don't know the full impact of going to 30% because it's only been about a year we've been dealing with that code change, plus restricting it to the pin-mounted raceway style signs we thought would be appropriate. I think we definitely have an appetite for reducing that further if this plan commission and the council wanted it.
Just for
Oh yeah,
for
no,
this
I agree.
particular zoning designation. Because I look at this zoning designation as not only being just, we're doing it for a specific area right now, but I'm looking at, possibly using this to extend all the way down to the lake on that, to the river on that road. Potentially you can use it over on Jackson, at some point in time. Obviously there's stuff already built there, but you can, potentially use it as a gateway area in there. That's what, yeah, you may not want to call it corporate, okay? But, if you're gonna have this standard to be used, it should be able to be used elsewhere in the city. And not just one place, but I do have a little, I've always had a problem with signage. Ed and I've always disagreed on signage, but I get what Ed's point is.
I disagree with everyone on signage, though.
Well,
so.
Especially on when we're gonna look at item 6, that now the zoning is gonna incorporate some existing businesses on the 41 corridor, where that signage is extremely important to them. And if something were to happen to that sign, and then this new ordinance, they'd have to adhere to it, they got a problem.
Well, like for Wall
And I don't want to create a problem for them. They're established businesses that are part of this community and have been for a long time. I don't want to create, something that we don't know about for them. So that's why I was kind of asking about the signage, not only the size appropriate, but then how does it, to Ed's point, how does it apply or not apply to those existing businesses that are on the 41 corridor that we allowed everybody else on the 41 corridor to have pylon signs that are
And continue
60
to
feet
allow.
tall, and continue to allow to have those ones, even though we don't want them, we continue to allow them to happen, but then we're gonna say, nope, you're part of the corporate business part,
Except
you
for that
can't do that.
One.
Yeah.
That's here.
Yeah, you can't do that along the 41
Well,
corridor when everybody else can.
You have to also recall, as part of this discussion, as to the mayor's point with the uses, along the corridor and the gateways coming in, they're almost virtually all zoned SMU. You'd have a whole milieu of uses that you can put in those areas. With this particular zone, we're being more restrictive with uses by right.
Well, I guess
things
what
like
I'm gonna
that.
ask in the next one is, why do they have to apply to those two, that land that's right up next to the 41 corridor?
Fine. Take them out.
David?
Well, I'm
Something to do with
sympathetic to what Ed is saying. There's two things. It's the yeah, but. You have the advent of GPS, and you have the advent of the blue sign on interstates. So I think that, we start worrying about, high signs and things of that nature. I think that this is the template not only of whether it's South Park or Ninth, but gives us the opportunity to revisit Highway 41. And I think that when you look at what communities have done that are along interstates, that have commercial, you go to Mequon, even in a little bit in Germantown, they function very nicely without pylon signs. And I'm sure there's other examples. So I'm less concerned about the two parcels that are adjacent, and I think that this may be arguably the beta test, but I think that this also could be what if and when we revisit Highway 41 and say, what do we want the redevelopment of those areas to look like?
Steve, and then I think we need to move on to the public before they lose
Just total one,
interest.
just one quick comment. The 41 corridor is the 41 corridor. You're also going 70 miles an hour. You're probably going past Oshkosh or past Appleton or Fond du Lac. Again, it's a gateway to the city of Oshkosh, and I think this is our one opportunity to really look at this as a clean slate and do it right, and use this as a template for a Jackson Drive in the future, for a Ninth future, for the South Park. What do we want? What impression do we want to leave on people when they enter Oshkosh? And I think this is our chance to do it right.
All right, with that, let's close the technical questions. Anybody here from the public to speak to this item today? Has anybody made any point that somebody out there wasn't already thinking of? Okay, back to the commission. More discussion. Who's first? Kathy?
I sense there's a lot of people out here in the audience that want to speak on this, but maybe they've already talked with staff and are more or less comfortable with what we've got here. I understand exactly what Ed's trying to say, but I also think that any rational plan commission or board of zoning appeals, should somebody's Highway 41 pylon sign fall down, tornado come through or something, that personally, I think they would be entitled to replace their pylon sign, or to make it possibly even higher. So, even though they would be technically non-conforming on this. But I understand that you prefer certainty.
I don't like to assume rationality.
I'm also looking at the number of parcels we've got here, and I'm trying to count them on this particular map. Maybe we've got 15 current parcels. We're not talking about very many parcels. And a lot of those probably will be combined in redevelopment.
20.
About 20 parcels.
So, and a lot of those will be combined. We're not talking about very many parcels here. So that's one point. I wish that so many uses were not permitted, but we've had that discussion at the workshop and I lost that, so. And people made good points about why you don't want to exclude some of these uses, and they are conditional use. Does that mean that if a use comes in and it's a conditional use, and for some reason we don't like where they're locating, something isn't right in terms of what the plan commission feels, does that mean we can vote no?
Well, you have the.
In theory, I'm not talking about.
There's some changes have been made in the state with respect to conditional uses, which was very recent, that we pretty much have to accept those conditional uses a conditional use will be approved if they agree to all the conditions that we place on them. So we can dictate the conditions that are placed on it. They'd have to accept it. If they don't, then it would be denied. And in this particular area, we also have that planned development status as well, and that's where we start to look at architectural quality, other things like that. So it's another level of standard of review. So we have both the conditional use standard and we have the planned development standard.
Okay, so basically then, we would, if one of these uses comes in, agrees to meet whatever criteria, plan development criteria, whatever else we put on it, then we have to accept it. Yeah, that's what I thought.
I didn't propose that change at the state.
And
that was recent.
I also, as long as I've got the floor, I like David's idea of working toward no outdoor storage and no outdoor vending. And if that's possible, with some of these uses, I can see, let's call it clutter.
We prohibit
outside the
incidental.
building. And even if it's on the back side of the building, it's still clutter. So I would like to see that addressed.
Again, what we could put it as, if you want to go with that recommendation at the end, incidental outdoor display, we could prohibit that as a use. They could potentially negotiate that back in with the prohibited or with the planned development, but at least it'd be going into it, they'd say that.
Okay, and then we have a use potentially coming in that's not my favorite use. In that type of use, there are a lot of beer signs, usually in windows. Budweiser, Coors, they do that in every single window.
Well, we're not there, and that was another thing that you can control. If we get to that level,
Okay.
with the planned development, you can control those things.
Okay, that's all I have for right now.
Jeff and then David.
Yeah, a couple things there. I agree with Kathy. I mean, we have a lot of uses in here, and we get our hands tied as far as, if it's conditional use, you're going to be hard pressed to say no even though it may not be one that we want. And if we do try to say no, or if we're not consistent, and like Ed said, you got a different planning commission or a different common council, and they say yes to one guy, and 5 years ago we said no, you're gonna run yourself into legal issues, potentially.
Yeah.
The other one, and I agree with Mayor Cummings, this particular ordinance ought to be a little bit tighter than I think what we're used to. And, we say, oh, but keep in mind, guys, we got the PD. We have not had a whole hell of a lot of appetite to putting intensive restrictions in PDs. We just haven't, especially on signage. We just haven't. It gets brought up and it gets shot down. So I'm a little bit more apprehensive based off the years I've been here on how we use PDs and whether we'll actually have the appetite to do it, to control some of the aesthetic things. So for me, having a little bit higher, standards in here, shrink down the signage, I get what you're saying. We don't have any experience. You're not gonna have any experience by the time we're doing this. You're just not.
That wasn't my point. My point was.
Yeah, but that's
we
my
roll it
point.
back.
My point is that we rolled it back, and I get it. But the current rollback is 30%. I'm saying for this particular use, that's still too much. So if we don't change that here.
I don't think we disagree. If you
Yeah, but
have
if
the
we don't
appetite to roll
change
that
that
back.
here, okay, and make it apply to this particular, zoning ordinance, then I'm afraid we're gonna have too, they're gonna say, well, geez, we use the underlying, and everybody's gonna say, yeah, okay. Because that's what we've done in the past. We do it on stormwater. We do it on this. I mean, we've done it on signage, where we haven't had the appetite to put that additional standard in there because the development would go away. Now, on the same token, I think in this particular one, I think we've gone pretty good as far as having certain uses that they just won't come in because of the four-sided design and class 1 materials. It's just going to make it maybe cost prohibitive for them to build a building and make the profit that they want, to get their IRR or whatever their measurement is. It just ain't gonna happen. So the combination of the two, I think, is good. But I would like to see us take a look at what our underlying for commercial is, and compare and contrast against what we're trying to accomplish in this to see where we need to go.
This is the time to do that.
No, I understand that. All I'm doing is making that recommendation. And in terms of the next one we're talking about, again, when it comes to the 41 corridor, I'm not 100% sure, because originally I didn't think this particular zone was going to go all the way down to 41 and encompass those current properties that are there. Now we are. Well, now I got, wait a minute, what is the negative impact on those people? Now, that doesn't have anything to do with what we're talking about now. This is about this particular ordinance. I think for the most part, this particular ordinance does what I'm thinking, but I think there's still pieces of it, signage and things of that nature, that we have to maybe refine just a little bit. I like the idea that Dave and Kathy came up with. I didn't even think about, this kind of ancillary stuff that sits out in front of the buildings that makes it kind of cluttered, and that's not what you want to see.
Is there a number? That's where this discussion
I'm
is
asking
to
you
have.
guys.
So
A number of what?
here's a question. What if we
Signage?
what if we move this forward? Let's say, for the sake of argument, we move this forward to the council with a request that staff evaluates some options. And personally, if I was on the council, what I would like to see, if you were bringing this back to us in 2 weeks, but please don't, because I don't want to belabor this anymore. I would like to see some examples of various types of buildings that may
serve as examples within this area and what those signage, so pick out a single-story predominantly retail building of 8,000 square feet. Pick out a two-story, 16,000 square foot professional office building. Pick out a 40,000 square foot, four-story building. Pick out a hotel, something like that, and evaluate maybe what some of those examples would be in terms of how much signage is on there. And then I think the council can make a determination what they feel to be appropriate for that
Might even
level of
show
signage.
a 10%, 20%,
Yeah,
30%
exactly.
on
I mean,
this wall.
See, that's the
and
thing.
say, okay, wait a minute. here.
I know what I think is appropriate for signage. Clearly, it's a lot more than what Jeff thinks is appropriate, but I don't know what that means as a number. I have no idea what that means. I mean, is that a feasible sort of option to move forward? I don't know.
David, and then Steve.
I'll answer that, no. I think
Fine.
I think, because that's part of our responsibility as plan commission members.
But how do we do that without knowing?
Visually, I get,
pick a number.
I get where Ed's, I
Right?
get where
Like,
Ed's going with
just
it.
picking a
Can I do it in
number.
2 weeks
dumb.
with what's happening? I don't know. We'll have to talk to staff and see if we can put something
Well,
together.
But if we have,
I
do
could
do
tell
we
you
have
15, but I don't
a
know that
time
there's-
is the essence with this?
Well, what would happen if,
Time is- yeah.
No, okay, and I thought that I'd heard that at a previous meeting or whatever. So the question is, we identified some areas that we're uncomfortable with. Can we address this, and if there's some easy fixes that we can address right now, but with the understanding that it's gonna come back here and we're gonna retool it right away.
Well, if the concern is we got too much signage with the wall signage, just limited to 10% right now. I mean, I'd rather be, and if you're
I'd
concerned
rather
about.
you put it 10% and do a planned development to increase it.
I don't disagree with that.
Because then you would have to take action to increase it.
Yeah, I think that's fine.
Okay.
Yeah, but the following-
David has the
I would
floor
like
and
to
Steve's next.
Just follow up what Kathy said, and there's things that we don't think about, and that's, how do you handle window signs?
We have a code on that, by the way.
I'm sorry?
We have a code on that, by the way, now. Now we do.
And what does that say?
I think it's 20%.
All right, and I would
Well,
suggest,
33%.
in this area that there are no window signs other than identification of the company and the hours of operation, and that's it. That there's no, any kind of signage in the windows. Because all they are is advertising signs. It's, and they should be, and if they were there, they should be counted against any of the other signage on the building. It's, we just let it get by, so the easiest way, I think, is just to say, no window signs.
Steve.
Thank you. We're being asked to make some decisions based on a lot of visuals, and we have no visuals in front of us. I mean, it's hard. I can't figure out what 30 feet is. I mean, show me type of thing. And I think, Stephen, you did a great job at the last meeting with your different examples. I think I would feel comfortable, and I'll speak for the council, if we had some visuals to look at. All this, we're talking dimensions, and it's hard to visualize dimensions without having something in front of us. I think for the council meeting, I said before, if there's communities that have done a great job with their gateways, either new communities or communities that are old that are redoing their gateways, I think those should be brought to the council meeting so we can take a look at what we're really envisioning, all of us, for the Oshkosh Avenue gateway, the corridor into the city. And
So what do we recommend that we do with this in front of us? Kathy?
I heard Jeff or somebody, maybe you concurred that if we said 10% all signage, which is maybe not enough,
But someone can always appeal
to me
it.
it's a lot. And 10%, and then if it goes forward to the council and our friends out here scream, council can change it to 15 or 20 with visuals. I guess I'd like, let's pick a number that isn't 30%, it's less than 30%.
In order to move this forward.
And let's add the no outdoor storage and no outdoor vending.
And a
And
trade
beyond
dress
that, I think
initiative.
we've
Or the trade.
Trade dress.
Trade dress definition.
define
Which we have, it just
trade
isn't in
dress.
there, right?
So if we can do that, I think we could probably move
Like 90% of it's fine, right?
Nobody's gonna
Yeah.
be able to build anything.
I mean, it's what we've already workshopped on.
We've legislated.
Jeff?
I agree with Kathy. I think 90% of what we're doing here is, to me, is fine. There is some little tweaks here and there, and some of the things that Dave and Kathy thought about. There's just some little tweaks here, and in order to move it forward to the council, so the council can get it, then the council can make that last minute tweak over signage when they see a couple of examples of the signage. Or whatever else that may come up once you kind of take a look at what commercial zoning is and how does it meet in here, and does that achieve the objective of having a tight standard to give us the look that we want, okay? And if it doesn't, then you need to tweak this particular zone so it does.
Okay, so I'm hearing when someone makes a motion very soon, it's gonna include feedback on the signage, outdoor and ancillary storage, and then the trade dress definition.
Well, trade dress definition, we'll handle that.
Okay.
We'll move that, because that'll be a separate
I
ordinance.
just wasn't sure if we needed it as part of the
In
motion.
That'll be in the definition, so we'll come back with that.
Make that motion.
Well, so I heard no incidental outdoor display. We're going 10%, you're thinking?
And
10, 15. I've seen.
Outdoor storage not allowed, is it?
Yeah, no outdoor, we call it storage and display is how the code section is. So we'll add that to the prohibited.
Just to be clear.
15. I've seen codes that break out front facades versus side and rear, where maybe front is 15, side and rear are lower.
I think with the
Don't count.
four.
I'm complicating it for you.
Yeah.
Yeah, because we're going
move this
360
forward.
on the cosmetics.
Yeah,
so
just
I think
15?
360,
15.
15 on each side.
I also heard a brief discussion about window signage.
No window signage.
We could exempt window signage?
That seems
Isn't that
pretty
already
extreme.
kind of in?
Well, the one issue you're gonna have with that, you
I'm
do
sorry
have
if a
existing
place has
businesses that are
a
located
unique
in there.
thing that they have, like,
Which may not be
take
for
the
long.
tavern thing into it. How many
One at a
places can you
time,
find-
folks.
How many places can you find Guinness on tap, or how many places can you find Fifth Ward Brewing Company beer? Maybe they have a Fifth Ward sign. I mean, I don't think that I might, and there are other things with other businesses.
Well,
I
you
don't
said we have an
think the
existing
windows-
code that
So
governs some of that.
right now the code is 33% of an individual glass mullion or frame can contain window signage. That's the current code requirement. So
Yeah, but one of the things we aren't thinking about, you're saying no window signage at all. Okay, guys, you can't put Merry Christmas up there. That's a window sign. Now, I know it's to an extreme, okay, I get it.
window
But
signs
what
are
I'm saying
advertising
is,
for the business.
It's still window signage, okay? And if
We would
we
not
say,
treat that as
if
window
we
signage.
say no window signage, then we may be overreaching unintendedly to do.
In the
or
interest of
somebody wants to
moving
put
this
up-
forward, can we skip the window signage piece for now?
Yes, I'll agree to that.
Because we'll never get out of here.
We got a workshop to get to, too.
So you want to read
It's
that
fine
over
with me, I
again?
won't throw
Okay.
anybody on here.
Okay, so,
I made a motion I'd like to have him read the stipulations over.
right,
Okay, so we're gonna take out the incidental outdoor display and storage, which is how we handle the stuff that David had discussed. And we're gonna lower the allowed facade signage to 1 linear foot per foot of frontage of the building at a maximum of 15%.
Correct.
And the trade dress definition, we'll just update our definitions. That'll be a separate text amendment.
all right.
I will second that.
And no vending machines.
Yeah, that's the
That's,
same.
that,
Outdoor
sales.
that's the
Okay, so it's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion?
Oh,
Go ahead, Ed.
Just because I'm a
glutton for punishment.
I generally am supportive of this, but limiting the signage the way that we're talking about, on top of some of the other stuff that we've done here, I understand. I understand everything we're doing. I support everything we're doing. I have heard the word gateway more times than I care to hear today in my existence. But that's what it is, and we need to be sensitive to it. I will warn you that we are going to see PD requests in this district that are going to blow up everything that we've done here from a signage standpoint, because what we're doing is simply not commercially reasonable. It's not what anyone is going to be willing to develop under. And I say that wholeheartedly supporting what we're doing here, but as somebody who does this for a living, we are not going to be able to get people to live with the thresholds that we're setting. So I'll support it in the interest of, being a team player, moving it along, getting out of here to go pick up my kids here like 20 minutes ago. But I think just we're setting ourselves up for failure here big time. So that's all I have to say.
Okay. Any other discussion? Okay, call the roll.
Weigert.
Aye.
Ford.
Aye.
Borsuk.
Aye.
Bowen.
Aye.
Holmes.
Aye.
Hintz.
Aye.
Cummings.
Aye.
Crop.
Aye.
And Foytek.
Aye.
Motion carried 9-0.
All right, moving on, item number 6. Zone change from I Institutional District, SMU Suburban Mixed Use District, SMU PD Suburban Mixed Use District with planned development, and SR2 Single Family Residential 2 District to Corporate Business Park with a planned development overlay for property located at 1634 through 1900 Oshkosh Ave and 1886 through 1936 Rath Lane. Who's up?
I am sorry, Mr.
All right.
Chairman.
This will be fun.
Okay, so now we have the implementation of the district we were just discussing. This is the existing land use map, so Lakeshore Municipal Golf Course, and then along Oshkosh Avenue, we have a mixture of uses. We have kind of on the east end, a couple of residential properties, a couple of vacant properties, and then we have kind of the mixture of existing commercial, existing vacant property as we head west along Oshkosh Avenue out towards the 41 corridor. There are two, obviously existing commercial sites on the 41 corridor. In total, it's approximately 20 parcels of property that we are discussing a zone change for. So here we have the existing zoning map. So right now, obviously the golf course is I institutional. There are 7, I believe, residentially zoned properties along Oshkosh Avenue on the east end, and then the remainder of the properties are currently zoned SMU PD. The zone change request at this time would be to change all of those properties to the Corporate Business Park Plan Development District. So here with site aerial of the map, just kind of showing you what the existing site conditions are. This would be the proposed land use map. Obviously, we just did the change along Oshkosh Avenue and the golf course. Those have been finalized through council. So the comprehensive land use map for this area does call for commercial development on all parcels that we are requesting the zone change for. So the staff is recommending approval of the zoning district we just discussed. That is to go from SMU, SMU PD, I institutional, and SR2 single family to the corporate business park with a planned development overlay.
Technical questions. Kathy and then Jeff.
On the map in our packet, it looks like 2 parcels, residential parcels on the Mary Jewel end are not included.
That was done on the comprehensive land use map. It is not part of the zone. That map is wrong. The zoning request does not include those N2 parcels.
Right, so they are still SR2.
Yep. I think the map you have in your packet is right. The 2 on the end are not included in the rezoning request.
Right.
Jeffrey.
Can I ask why we're going all the way over to 41? Why are we including those 2 businesses? They're not part of the corridor. I'm sorry. I mean, they're not part of this entry corridor. You come off that highway, you go down, and you can't even see those buildings. I don't know why you're including that as part of this zoning and why you're not leaving them the way they are, which then doesn't draw them in to this standard if they have a rebuild or redevelopment that has to go on in those buildings, and now they have to come up this higher standard, which now means you can't have a pylon sign, you can't do this, that, and the other. I don't understand, because I didn't think that was my understanding of how far down this zoning was gonna go, and now all of a sudden it's there.
We proposed that from the outset, I believe.
Well, then I was asleep.
Well, it's from a district-wide and from a neighborhood cohesion standpoint, why would we isolate out those two parcels in that particular area when we know at some point they're gonna come under redevelopment, and we want them to redevelopment with the same standard that is just here to the east in that business?
And why would you change their standard when they're under the 41 corridor standard?
There's no 41 corridor standard with the exception of the signage. That's it. There is no 41 corridor overlay anymore. That doesn't exist.
We got rid of it?
Yeah, we got rid of it with the zoning update because the 41 corridor was basically a bunch of architectural design standards. That was the major. We instituted those citywide. So that was what happened there.
Tell me what the negative consequences are to those existing properties, to those business owners, to those properties that are not part of the gateway, but we're including them as part of the gateway. What are the negative issues for those business owners?
They get to, well, if you redevelop, you're gonna have to redevelop to these standards.
And when you say redevelop, what's that mean?
If
What's
you
our
tear,
definition?
if you tear down the building, you're gonna be, if you tear down the building, want to redevelop, you have to redevelop to these architectural standards.
If you were gonna do a building addition or something, these standards would not necessarily apply, because we'd wanna see cohesion in the addition in the existing building. These would really apply to if they chose to tear down the building.
So
start from
a
scratch.
remodel doesn't a sign blowing down doesn't,
Nope.
they're grandfathered from here till doomsday.
It would be until they chose to fully redevelop the site. They would have to meet these standards if they chose to fully redevelop them.
Same thing we're talking about with landscaping, for the parking, all those things that we've worked on over the years to try and bring things in line because we've seen deficiencies.
If they had to redevelop the parking lot, it would just be to our new parking lot ordinance.
Correct. Correct.
Fine.
All right, other technical questions? All right, seeing none, anyone here from the audience to speak to this item today? Okay, back to the commission.
Move for approval.
I'll second.
Any discussion?
I couldn't be here.
All right, call roll.
Kiefer,
Aye.
Weigert,
Aye.
Ford,
Aye.
Borsuk,
Aye.
Holmes,
Aye.
With Steve said.
Ince,
Aye.
Cummings. Oh, I'm sorry, you left. Brock,
Kathy?
Aye.
and Wojtek.
Aye.
Motion carried 8-0.
Okay, before we adjourn, Jeff, your last meeting?
Yeah, I would just take a few minutes. This will be my last meeting on the planning commission. I've been on for a little over 8 years. Retired and moving on to, we built our retirement home and moving on. And it's been a real pleasure, especially the guys that I've worked with for a long time, you know, Ed and John and Robert and Tom and Dave. Worked with a long time on this planning commission. And Deb, I really appreciate all the things you've done for us, taking care of us
Thank you.
and taking care of me and answering all my stupid questions. Really appreciate your work and that of city mayor, city manager Roloff and Mayor Cummins and former Mayor Burke Tower, who put me on this and then also put me on the long range planning commission, or long range finance commission. Been part of a lot of things. Was also on the bike ped plan when we initiated all that. Extraterritorial finance, planning commission, and I've had a lot of good times. We've done a lot of good work. I think we've gotten better as the planning commission has gone on over the years. We've gotten better. The new guys, John and Mike, what I would tell you is we've gotten better because we've had this sometimes constructive dialogue, sometimes dissenting opinions. That is what I think has made this planning commission better, because it doesn't allow us to get into that group think and just think, oh yeah, here's it. So I would encourage you to carry on doing the outside the box thinking and really question people, question even the planning staff, get them thinking a different way, because I think that's made us better as a planning commission. I think it's made the community a little bit better. you know, I see a lot of neat things gonna go on for Oshkosh. Some of the developments that I'm aware of, some of the ones that, you know, I think are coming up. There's some good developers here, I think, that we're doing with the gentleman that created the stadium now wants to do some more. I think the Dumpkeys have done some nice things, and there's others that have done some really nice work here. So I'll miss all that. I'll miss doing this. You know, I was on the Ripon Community Development Corporation. I was the developer for business development for our company for a long period of time at Alliance, and you know, it was fun.
Thank you so much,
Thank
Jeff.
you. Thank you for your service,
We'll miss
Jeff.
you.
Yes.
We appreciate that.
Always listen.
And one other announcement. This is also another staff member's last meeting tonight, not mine. Yes, Adam, where's Ed? Is he here yet?
No, you're right.
Deb is retiring, so this is her last meeting with us. We've enjoyed her service. She's been great to work with. I know she's, she's retiring. It's gonna be a huge loss to our division. We're sad to see her go, but we're happy to see her going to retirement. So
Thank you, Deb.
Deb will really
Thank
miss you.
you. Thank you very much. It has been my pleasure.
All right.
she's a woman of few words, as you know that.
Yes.
So thank you.
But
We
a lot
will.
of sharp pencils.
Yes.
So now, Tom, I move to adjourn.
Thank you.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
All right. We're done. Workshop.
Last act.